Welcome everybody to lesson 3 of Introduction to Web Development or Web Design. Today we're going to be covering some introductory CSS, and as always this lesson is recorded and posted on the Alphademic Learning YouTube channel. Oh yeah, so first a reminder, if you guys could please turn off your webcams, so just in case, like for privacy reasons, just in case your face gets like put onto the YouTube video, we don't want that to happen. So just turn off your webcam. And then let's start off with some nice websites that were made by some students from the last homework. And I blocked out like the names and some locations for privacy purposes, but let's just see some students' websites. Okay, so this person's website I thought was pretty good. You can see that they have like a title and then short biography, and they have everything labeled with headings, different headings, and they've used the horizontal rules to separate and make different sections out of their website. So that's pretty good. And you also notice that their background color is different and stuff, and their text is centered. So clearly this person also knows a little bit of CSS. That's what we're going to cover today. So I like this website a lot. Oh, and there's the bottom of the website. They have some pictures. This one also was pretty good. This one was written using pure HTML. They also have some pretty good design, I think. They have a title and then some text and a list, and it's organized pretty well for just HTML. Finally, this website I also liked a lot because they also included some CSS, which we're going to cover today, but they included some colors and then some different sections and some pictures. Okay, so let's start off with a review of what we've learned so far. So the past 2 lessons, we've been covering exclusively HTML. So remember that HTML, or hypertext markup language, is used to add the content of a web page. It's made up of layered elements that are made up of tags. And we learn how to add text to a web page. So the headings tags, P tag, that's a typo. It's supposed to be UO, unordered list, or no, UL. And then ordered list, OL. We also learn how to include attributes to some tags. So for example, the title attribute in the text to make a tooltip. And then we also learn how to add images and links to a web page using the A tag and the IMG tag. And also we learned some style elements in HTML, such as the bold, the horizontal rule, or the line break using these tags. Today we will learn what CSS is, the basic structure and syntax of CSS, and then how to add CSS to a web page. So first, let's start off with what is CSS? CSS is cascading style sheets. That's what it stands for. Basically, it's complementing HTML. We use it to stylize the content of a web page. For example, to change the colors, fonts, sizes of images, sizes of text, and background color or images. Basically, the CSS code tells the browser how to display, in what format to display the HTML content. And the current version of CSS is CSS 3, so that's what we're going to be learning. And this is an example of some CSS code, right? It's just, you can see there's several blocks, and we'll cover what this stuff means in the next few slides. So first, this is a plain website without CSS. This is just pure HTML, nothing else. You can see we have the headings, a list, some paragraphs, some general text, and some links. That's about it. And you'll notice that everything's just up and down. There's the heading first, and then this paragraph, and then this list, and up and down. So it's pretty boring. There's not a lot of color in it. Next, we see this is a same website with CSS added. And you'll notice that now, first of all, it's much more colorful. We have green, blue, black, and white. So that makes it a little bit more interesting. We can also see that the elements of the HTML are much more structured, and they look a little bit better. We have a heading section up here, and then we have some buttons and a different sidebar and the main text here. So that's an example of what we can do using CSS, and we'll probably be able to make this kind of website at the end of the next 2 lessons. So let's first start off with some CSS syntax. So basically how CSS is structured. Basically, in CSS, all the code is written with different blocks. So you can see in this example here, in this picture here, you can see the different blocks. So we have this block, and this block, this block. Each of them targets some different HTML elements, and each of them contains properties to stylize those targeted HTML elements. So each CSS block, and this right here is an example of a block that I'm referring to. Each block contains several parts. You'll see first part in the beginning, there's what is known as a selector. So a selector basically tells the code, tells a browser what to target, what HTML elements this block will stylize. So in this example, it targets all the paragraph elements in the HTML. Now, next we have these brackets, and inside the brackets we have declarations which contain properties. So in this declaration, we have a property. This is the property name, and then this is a property value. So the property name tells us, what property of what we're targeting is going to be edited, or it's going to be stylized. And then we have a colon pointing to the property value. And in this case, the property value is red. So this is telling us what property we're going to edit, and it says color. So we're editing the color of the paragraph text. And this tells us what color it should be. So this tells us it should be red. And then we always end a declaration with a semicolon to say that that's the end. We need that, or else there's going to be an error. Oops, sorry. And then we can see there's another declaration here. This one, the property name is text align. So this specifies where the paragraph text should be aligned. So either it can be left, center, justified, or right. And basically this says this is a property value. It says that it's going to be aligned to the center of the text. And in the next few slides, I'll explain several different types of selectors. And also just note that when you're writing CSS code, it has white space collapsing. So what that means is that if you like put a bunch of spaces in between these words or anything, it won't really matter that much as long as you have the brackets and semicolons and correct property names. So next we talk about selectors. Basically, selectors, like I said, they basically tell the web browser what HTML elements this block or that block of CSS will target. And there's 3 different types. We have the ID selector, the element selector, and the class selectors, and I'll explain very soon. So let's open up REPL.it from every other, like the last few classes, right? I guess I'll give you guys 1 minute to open it up. It's your websites that we've been doing. So some people are asking, like, how do you make stuff blue or stuff? Don't worry, we'll cover that in a few slides. But first, I'll explain what selectors are. Somebody asked, do we have to turn in the websites that we made during class when we were finished? No, you don't have to turn it in. You can do anything you want with it. Okay, I think most of you probably have the your REPLs open. So where do we enter the CSS code, right? I'll explain the different options in a later slide, but first, for examples for the first part of this lesson, we'll just click on the left side, this section, there's a file called style.css. And then this is where we're going to enter most of our CSS code. So first, I'm going to talk about the CSS Element Selector. So basically, I'm going to write an example here. I'll explain it. What color? All right. So this is, oops, sorry. This is an element selector. And that's a CSS comment right there. So the element selector, and remember the selector is the front part, this part of CSS. The element selector, basically, you use it to target elements, like an element type inside of HTML. So if we write P, for example, that means that this block of CSS will target all P elements inside of this website. So that includes this text. Yeah, I think that's about it. And if you run it, you'll notice that all the paragraph elements in this website are turned orange because I told it to in this code. We can also target a different element. For example, let's say we wanted to target this title here. This is a heading 1, so we do heading 1, and let's say I want to make it brown. All right, and we run, and we see the text is brown. So the element selector selects targets all HTML elements of that element type here. Next, we have what is known as an ID selector. So basically, an ID selector basically you can assign one single unique element, HTML element, a unique ID name. And then when we use that selector inside the CSS, it'll only target that one unique element. So for example, let's say we want to target this here, about Daniel's animal shelter. That's a heading 2. We could give it an ID. And how do we give it an ID? How do we give it an identification name? We do that with the ID attribute. So remember, attributes are always placed in the opening tag after the tag name, but still inside these arrows thingies. And so we do the ID attribute equals, and then inside the quotes, we just give it an ID name. You can do whatever you want. I'll just call it about, because it's a descriptive ID name. It identifies this heading 2, which is the title for the About Daniel's Animal Shelter section here. And in order to use the ID selector inside the CSS, the first structure is we put a number symbol or hashtag, and then we put the ID name, which is about. And then let's say we want to make the color. Let's say we'll make it blue-violet. Oops. Okay. Oh yeah, it's a lowercase a. So this is case sensitive when you're talking about ID names. Yeah, and then you'll see that H2 is, H2 is targeted specifically. And this is useful when you have a unique element. Like, let's say you have several H2 elements in your code, and you only want to target this one. So we can use an ID to target specifically that element. And you can only assign an ID to one element. You can't assign the same ID to several. So let's call this the ID selector. Oops, selector. Selector. Finally, we have what is called a class selector. So a class selector. So what a class selector is it basically, if you want to target several HTML elements, but not all of them, or if you want to target several HTML elements that are a different type, for example, if you wanted to target this P and this heading, if you wanted to target them both, well, you could just assign them each an ID, give them each an ID, and just do the same thing for both. Or you could assign them to the same class, which makes it a little bit easier because you only need to write one block of CSS code. So how do you assign them a class? So first, you have to find where this element is. In this case, the paragraph element is here. So how do you assign it a class? You assign it a class by doing the class attribute, class equals, and then the class name. So let's call this orange color text. That'll be our class name. And then we assign the same class name to this H3 here, because we want it to have the same properties as this paragraph. So we'll assign it the same class name equals. And then how do you use the class selector in CSS? Well, the syntax is you do a period or a dot, and then you put the class name. So text. And that basically says that this is a class and we're targeting all elements of this class, which include this and this text, both of those. And because it's called orange color text, let's make the color orange. It's my favorite color. So now both of these are orange. So those are the 3 types of selectors that we'll cover today, or we just covered them. The ID selector, the element selector, and the class selector. And just to sum up, the element selector is used to select all elements of that specification. So if you call P, it'll target all P elements. If you select H2, it'll select all H2 elements. And then the ID selector is used to target a specific ID, and you can only assign one single unique element a specific ID, and it'll target only that element. Finally, we have this slide, which is the class selector. And the class selector, you can assign the same class to multiple elements, and in CSS, it'll target, if you target the same class, it'll target all of those elements that you've assigned that class. So let's move on a little bit. Let's say you've assigned the same class to several elements and that are different element types. So in this case, in this example, I assigned this H1 element to the class called center, and you can name it whatever you want. That's just what the example is. And in this P element, we called the class center too, because it's part of the same class. Well, what if you only wanted to target the P element here, and you already have a center class target CSS block above this? Well, you could do the element name before the period of the class name, and then have your stuff there. And that'll only target P elements with the center tag. Yeah, if you have questions, just ask them once. You don't need to spam it. Yeah. And as always, this lesson is recorded on the YouTube, so and the slides are shared after class. So you can always go back and look after class. So yeah, somebody asked, how do you change the page, the background color? That'll be covered in a later slide very soon. So you can also assign an element with several classes and an ID. So let's say with this P element, for example, we want to assign it 2 classes, because in our CSS code, we have 2 classes that are targeted, and they have different properties in each of them. And we wanted both of those properties to target this element. Well, we could give it the two classes here. So you'll see that in the attributes, we have the class attribute, right? And then usually, if we only assign it to one class, we put quotes here and end it off, and it will be assigned to only the center class. But here we have a space and then a different class called large, and then we close off the quotes. This tells the web browser that this specific element is assigned to these 2 classes, so including center and large class. You can also, in addition to assigning it a class, you can assign it a unique ID too. So in this case, the example, the ID name is YoFace. So basically, in the CSS, when you target the center and large classes and the YoFace ID, it'll be targeting this element here. And if you look closely in this example here, there's a typo here. Since we're targeting the classes here, there's supposed to be a period in front of the center and large. So that's my fault, but yeah, there's a typo. Don't, like, if you do that, it won't work. So make sure you add a period in front of the center and large classes in the CSS. Another thing is, if you want to select everything in a web page, you can use what is known as a universal selector, which is an asterisk. And that selects everything inside the web page. So if you wanted to make all the text in this web page centered in the middle, you can select everything using the asterisk, and then in CSS, and then it will do that. Same thing for color. So for example, let's say you want everything in this web page to be centered in the middle, or let's say all the text. We can do asterisk and then, right, and then text align, which is the property, and then center. And you'll notice everything is centered in the middle of the web page. And the next lesson will cover some more properties like text align, but in this class, we'll first cover some basics. So now you see everything's aligned in the center because we're using the universal selector, which selects everything. Okay, so this whole time for all the examples, we've been putting the CSS inside this style.css file, right? There are actually 3 ways you can add CSS to HTML. One of them is obviously called the external CSS, which is we add the CSS in an external file, so outside of this HTML file, and all the CSS goes in here. And we link this CSS style sheet to this web page using this element here, the link element. Basically, this element says that this web page will be stylized by this file here, this style.css file. And you'll notice that REPL.it actually does this automatically when you make a REPL, but if you're not using REPL.it, you have to type this in manually inside the head element. And you'll notice that the link element doesn't have a closing tag. And then there's 3 attributes you need to put in to the link element. href, which tells the browser what the address of this style sheet is. So in this case, it's style.css. And then these 2, you don't really need to edit them, just copy and paste this into the same thing, because that just tells the web browser that this is a style sheet and that all the CSS for this web page will go in there. So this is how you connect this external CSS style sheet to this HTML web page. Alternatively, you can add what is known as internal CSS using the style element, opening and closing tags, and in the head. And then you can add CSS in here So for example, let's say we wanted to make this specific P tag a different color. Let's say yellow. So first we find it, and then let's give it an ID. Oops. The ID is yellow text. And then in here, we can just target that ID. Remember, using the number sign, and so the ID name is yellow text. And then we have the brackets, and inside, let's color it yellow. Right now, it's kind of unreadable. It's really ugly, but later when I assign a background color, it'll be more visible. Yeah. So, and so that's internal CSS, where you just write it inside here. And then you have inline CSS. So what is inline CSS? Usually we don't use inline CSS, but if you do, you usually do it for only a few properties. So let's say this H3 tag right here. Let's say we wanted to use inline CSS for that. Well, you would use the style attribute, and inside the quotes, you would put the CSS. So let's say color red, and remember the semicolon. And inside these quotes, inside the style attribute, you don't need ID, class, or element selectors. You just need to put the property in, because it knows that it's only targeting this H3. Oh, I have a typo here. H3 tag. And then you see this H3 text is targeted. But generally speaking, usually you don't want to use inline or internal CSS. Usually we just put it in external CSS sheet, because that's a little bit more organized, and it's easier to use because all of our styling and CSS is in this one file, and we don't need to edit anything in index.html. Okay. CSS comments. I had a few comments in here. Basically, the structure of a comment is /*, the contents, and then */. That won't be shown, that won't be read by the browser because it's a comment. Okay, before moving on, let's read some questions. Ooh, there's a lot of questions. First, how do you center all the words in your website? I did that before, and I'll cover it next lesson too. You use the text align property, and then center is a property value. What's the difference between ID and class? Okay, so you can also always, if you have like this kind of question, you can look back in the presentation after I post it. But basically, like I said, ID, you only use it to target one specific element, and you can only assign that ID to one specific element. Class, you can assign to several elements, to multiple, even if they're of different type. Somebody asked, how do you make those section lines in the website? Like, I'm assuming you're asking about these things. I think I covered this in like the second lesson, but the way you do this is using a horizontal rule tag, this tag here. And that just makes a horizontal line. For text align, you can also align it to the right, left, right, center, justified. I'll cover this next lesson too. Somebody asked, why aren't my bullet point centered, but everything else is? I'm not sure why. Maybe that's the problem on your side, but if you use the universal selector, it should select everything and make it centered. Okay, let's go back to the slides. So let's talk about text color now. In all my examples, I've used the color property where we change the color of text. So I'll talk a little bit about how CSS colors work. So there are several ways you can let the web browser, when it's reading through your code, know what color you are referring to, what color you want the text to be. So the first way is to call a color keyword. For example, green or blue or orange or black or whatever those most common color keyword names. And you can just say it right there and it'll recognize it as green. But of course, not all colors the web browser recognizes. So CSS usually recognizes 140 different colors, color keywords. And if you click this link on the presentation, it comes to this website with a list of color names that CSS recognizes. And here you see the color names, right? And then scroll down and it has all the 140 different color names. But what if it doesn't have a color name that you want, or you want to make your own custom color? Well, then you could assign the color by using an RGBA value. So basically, what does RGBA stand for? RGBA stands for red, green, blue, alpha. The first three values, RGB, red, green, blue, each of those numbers tell the web browser how much of that color you want in your final color. So imagine when you're mixing paint, right? When you're mixing paint, usually you mix like the primary colors, or you mix several different colors to make a color that you want. You can apply the same concept to RGBA. So for these first three numbers, we tell it how much of that color we want in our final color. So the numbers go from 0 to 255. The first number is red, how much red you want in the mix. Second number is green, how much green you want in the mix. And the third number is how much blue you want in the mix. And depending on how much red, green, or blue you mix into it, you'll end up with a different color. And that's how you make custom colors. Now you might be wondering what the fourth number is. So this is an alpha. This is the alpha number. What does that mean? This basically tells a web browser how transparent you want your color to be. So the number ranges from 0 to 1.0, and you input a decimal in there. With 0.0 being completely transparent, as in there's no color, and 1.0 being completely solid color. So you might be a little bit confused. If you go to this website, there's a color slider that you can use to make a color. So you'll notice that if we only slide around the red slider, you'll notice it becomes a different color depending on how much red you add. Same with green, same with blue. And to demonstrate the effect of this alpha slider, Right now it's at 0.5, so it's only at about half transparency. If we go up, it'll become more solid, more saturated. If we go down, it'll become less saturated and more transparent. And if we put it at 0, there is no color. It's completely transparent. So let's put it at 1. So how do you make black, the color black? Well, you put all the colors at 0, except for alpha, because alpha is transparency. That 000 RGB is black. If you want to make something white, you put everything up to 255, and then it becomes white. If you want gray, generally speaking, depending on how dark your gray is, how you make gray is, let's assign it 120. Basically, all the numbers have to be the same number, except for alpha, of course. But all the numbers are the same, and then you should make a shade of gray. And you can make it go up and down depending on what shade of gray you want. So that just demonstrates how the RGBA color system works. So in order to implement the RGBA color system, you after the color name, after the color property name, in the property value section, the syntax is RGBA and then parentheses, and then in order you put the numbers in: red, green, blue, and alpha. Yeah, so that's how you adjust the text color. In my examples, I'm lazy, so I just use the standard color names, but you can also use that color slider to adjust and make a custom color. Now, some people want to know how to adjust the background color. That's the next slide. Background color, basically you use the background color property name, and it's the same concept. You can either use a custom RGBA color, or you can use a keyword. So I don't like this white background here. I'm going to use a slider and make a more pleasant background color. So you can just play around with the slider, and then I like that light blue there. And then I'll just copy and paste the RGBA value into there. And how you assign the background color is you can either use a universal selector to select everything, right? And then background dash color. And we'll just paste in the RGBA there. And then a semicolon, and then you're done. And if you run, you'll notice that this whole thing is blue. This is weird. I'm not sure why these different sections are a different shade. That's not supposed to happen. What the? Yeah, so I'm not sure why that happened, but yeah. Alternatively, let's say you only wanted to adjust the background color of one element. You would assign the background color property to one specific element or class or the element, right? So, for example, let's assign a different background color to this section here. This is a very important section, so let's make it yellow, for example, and I'll assign it an ID. and then hashtag. And we can just edit the background color. And then you'll see that it's highlighted differently. I think I just realized why it's a different color. I'm not sure why, but basically I explained that you can use the universal selector to select everything, or you can use an element selector, right? So remember we have an element called body, which encloses all the content in our web page, right? So if we target the body element, I think it might work. I'm not sure though. Yeah, okay. If we use the body element, it'll select only the stuff in the body. But usually we would use the universal selector and then change some stuff in here. But in this case, I guess we're just using the body element selector. So that's the end. Yeah, that's the end. The homework for this week is adding a background color for the entire website. Change some text colors. And like this class, some good-looking websites will be chosen to be showcased next class. So that's the end of this lesson. If you want to leave, you can leave. It's officially over, and now's the question. Now's a Q&A section. So okay, so somebody asked, how do we change the color of a link? That's a good question. Basically, it's the same way you change the color of text. Let's say, okay, let's just target the A element because that's what we use for hyperlinks. And let's say we wanted to change it, I don't know, aqua. No, that's a bad color. Blue. Let's change it dark blue. You also use the color property to change it blue to a different color. I just realized that actually the links are default like blue, so let's change it to a different color. Let's change it red. And then you can see it just changes the color. How do you highlight something? I'm not sure what you mean by how do you highlight something. If you're talking about how to make the background of a specific element, basically you just target that element using a selector, and then you just change the background color. How do you change the background color? We'll cover how to change like the background image like next class and some other stuff, but a very simple thing is just use the background dash color property. Yes, this class is over.